Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the special 25th anniversary episode One Piece Fan Letter. This was a special commemorative episode to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the anime's release that loosely adapts a few of the stories found in the novel One Piece novel Straw Hat Stories, originally written by Osaki Tomohito. And so, what is this? What is Straw Hat Stories and its subsequent adaptation, Fan Letter? Essentially, it tells short stories involving ordinary people living in the One Piece world and their perspectives and relationships to the Straw Hat crew members as fans of them in universe and how they have impacted their lives. It's essentially a story that represents and is a meta commentary of all of us, the real life fans of One Piece and the fans of the crew of the Straw Hat Pirates. In the novel, each crew member gets their own short story revolving around a person or a group of people and their relationship to that specific crew member and how they've impacted their lives and also the perspective on life. The anime episode Fan Letter takes a few of those stories and condenses them down into a small little vignettes that happen independently of each other at first, but then they all converge towards the end, telling somewhat of a full, coherent narrative story. Now, full disclosure, I haven't actually read the novel Straw Hat Stories. I've only read a detailed synopsis of each short story, so I'll be working off of those mostly. I hope to eventually read it, but currently there isn't an official English translation of the novel, and while I can read manga with the help of furigana, which is like small hiragana and katakana next to kanji characters, novels generally don't have those, so it takes a lot of effort for me to read a novel in Japanese. And I know there are fan translations out there that are unofficial, but yeah, I guess I could eventually seek one of those out if they don't ever release an English version of this. But yeah, so I'll be working off of that. So the next question that often comes up when discussing either the novel or this episode is it canon? And so, yeah, are these events and characters canon to the main story? And this one is a bit hard to answer because no one from Shueisha, Toei Animation, Shonen Jump, or even Oda or his staff has come out and said directly that these are canon. Oda did give his approval for the novel and the episode as well, but then you think to yourself, how can these similar events be canon, and which ones is the real one? Is it the novel events or is it the fan letter events? And yeah, I think it is ambiguous because no one really knows for sure. And I think nothing that happens or is established in these stories or in fan letter have actually contradicted anything, nor has anything happened since that has contradicted anything in either of these sources. So if you really wanted, you can, in your own personal headcanon, consider these as part of the canon if you want, and you can choose which one you want to be canon either. So, or I guess technically both can be canon too. They don't necessarily contradict each other as well. It would just be kind of weird that the same events happen twice very similarly. Me personally, I really love the events of Fan Letter, and I like that it's canon for me personally. They did a really good job of incorporating the events of this story to what has already been established in the anime and in the manga. The other question on some people's mind about Fan Letter is, when should you watch this? At what point in the story should you watch this? And the simple answer is that you can watch this at the conclusion of the Return to Sabaody arc. So once you've reached episode 522 of the anime or chapter 602 in the manga, you're basically caught up to see Fan Letter. I do not recommend you watch this if you have not seen the conclusion at the very least of the Marineford arc, as it does have that big a spoiler. So definitely do not watch this if you have not finished Marineford. Alright, so let's get into the episode itself, but before I dive into the specific stories and scenes, I want to kind of talk about some overall things I loved about this special episode. Fan Letter does an amazing job at capturing what it means to be a fan of One Piece. And I'm obviously very biased about this, but I have been part of enough different fandoms and been a huge nerd of many different subjects and IPs, whether it's movies, TV shows, video games, sports, comics, books, technology, what have you. But One Piece is different, I feel like, from any of those other ones. When you talk to people about what One Piece means to them and how it's affected them, it's usually on a very personal level and in a very deep way more often than many other things. I think the only other series that I can think of that have touched people's lives on that deep of a level are series like Dragon Ball, Naruto, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Harry Potter. I'm sure there are ones that I'm missing, but I feel like these are comparable to how they've affected people. And obviously, I'm very biased. And I know there are so many others that are deeply personal to you all, but these 5 IPs I see mentioned by so many people as having inspired them or affected their lives positively in major and in minor positive ways. And so, yeah, I just think One Piece and Fan Letter does a really good job of capturing what it means to actually like truly be a fan of One Piece. And Fan Letter really speaks to all of us fans, big and small. You have characters that were inspired by the Straw Hats or specific members to become better versions of themselves or to aspire to be something they didn't think was possible in the episode. You also have characters that had the Straw Hats change their entire worldview and really help them through difficult times in their lives. You get to see how One Piece brings people together in a community, and even reference to the constant power scaling squabbles that we often have with our friends or with people online. You also get to see people who just love the aesthetics of how cute or how cool or how hot some of the characters are. And there's something for everyone to relate to in how we all enjoy One Piece in very different ways in Fan Letter. For me personally, I most relate to probably the first 2 I mentioned, because as you can tell, that One Piece has been a huge presence in my life in many significant ways, which I'll get into more detail when we go over some of the finer details of the episode. The other aspect I really loved seeing in Fan Letter was a glimpse into the perspective of normal citizens in One Piece. Like seeing these gods among humans and the crazy things that appear all over the place, especially in the Grand Line, truly from the eyes of a normal person, was pretty eye-opening, especially seeing the Marineford War from the perspective of a normal Marine soldier. Like the way we witnessed it from Luffy's perspective, sure, it was an arduous and dangerous battle, but because we saw everything from the perspective of these fighters that all have these amazing abilities, it was really fun and exciting to see for us. But the way it's conveyed in Fan Letter, you truly get the sense of just how terrifying war is. But not just any war, a war with people with crazy abilities that could destroy an entire city or a continent. And being that they are, monsters. And I'm not talking about just Oars Jr., but seriously, every major combatant featured is a monstrous level of strength. The way it shows what seeing Kizaru's and the Pacifistas' laser beams just blinding across the battlefield and exploding looks terrifying from that perspective. And one thing that really stood out to me was that sequence of seeing what Mihawk and Crocodile's showdown was like from a normal Marine soldier's perspective. To us, when we first read that or saw that, it was like, yeah, this is badass. But to these normal Marine soldiers, seeing like the embodiment of death closing in on them on both sides would be freaking terrifying. Like Crocodile is a known Shibukai criminal, and Mihawk is the most powerful swordsman known to man at that time in the series. And so to have both of them closing in on you and about ready to just duke it out in like a nuclear level battle is terrifying, and it really captures that really well. And that's one thing I loved about this, is seeing what it's like to be a normal person in the world of One Piece. The other thing I really loved about this is I love the whole puzzle piece theming as well. The idea that individually we may be limited in what we can do, but it's when we come together that we can accomplish big things, is right on track with the themes of of nakama and friendship that the series is built upon. And each of them contributes a piece to the puzzle to make something beautiful or accomplish a seemingly impossible task. And again, it's indicative of the wider fandom community. We all get to share in this amazing story, contributing our own theories, our own lessons that we've taken away, fan art, cosplay, experiences, interpretations of the story, Easter egg hunting, what have you, to create this amazing community. And finally, the other overarching thing before we kind of get into the specifics that I wanted to bring up is the visuals. Fan Letter is directed and animated so amazingly. This is directed by the now famous director Megumi Ishitani, who is legendary among One Piece fans as having directed a few of the most stunning episodes, specifically episodes 957, 982, and 1015. And I won't get into the details here since that is major spoilers and pretty far off down the line, but you can see her talent plenty even in this episode alone. I'm just impressed at how creatively and dynamically she and her staff convey things, like the fluid camera movements and her use of scale, colors, and lighting really enhance what we're seeing, unlike anything we've ever seen. And I think the best example of this is the opening montage of the Shichibukai doing their thing and comparing that to how the Shichibukai were presented in the original anime. Now, again, I don't necessarily mean to bash on the original animators because they were working on very strict deadlines and budgets, but the flat lighting, the limited colors, the static camera shots are really apparent when you compare what happens in Fan Letter to those specific instances in the original anime. The other scene that really demonstrates her ability is when Luffy uses Gomu Gomu no jet pistol to take out that first pacifista in one shot. And the way the camera pans to follow Luffy as he swings above the pacifista, then the actual punch just comes down and it just sort of radiates and then explodes. It's so amazingly done. Needless to say, they should let Megumi Ishitani direct the next One Piece film. That would be something to behold if she ever was able to direct a One Piece movie, or any anime movie for that matter. Like, she is truly talented. All right, so now that I've kind of gone through just my overarching thoughts, let's get into more of the details. So Fan Letter, in its adaptation of the Straw Hat Stories, has moved all the stories to take place in the Sabaody Island or archipelago to coincide with the Straw Hats returning from their 2-year hiatus that takes place in the main story, and it seamlessly interweaves the stories of these characters in with the events of that episode, which also allows for many characters to appear in the background as just kind of like passerbys. The novel instead has these stories taking place all over the world, like Dressrosa, Water 7, Syrup Village, the Baratie, and Sabaody. The way this episode starts off is absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous, like I mentioned, with the Marineford War distilled down to its major characters. But what's cool about this is that it uses the original opening narration from We Are, even using Chikao's Otsuka's original voice for Roger instead of his current replacement, Masane Tsukayama, to re-record it, which I thought was a nice touch. But I also love how it seamlessly transitions into new dialogue from the original narrator saying, however, launching into who will become our main characters for this story. The first character we're introduced to is Girl. The characters don't have proper names, so in this I'm just going to kind of refer to them by the names that they're listed as in the credits. And Girl is a super fan of Nami and is really inspired by Nami with her ability to keep up on this adventure despite not having devil fruit powers and relying on her intelligence, resourcefulness, and wit, which is a sentiment that I think all of us can relate to. It may not specifically be for Nami, but I think each one of us have looked at a character in the Straw Hat crew or even the hundreds of other characters and drawn some aspirational goals from them wanting to be more like them or adopt their strengths and personality. I know I have it, especially with Luffy and Usopp. I love Luffy's unending optimism and his drive, as well as how inviting of a person he is, and I always hope to kind of emulate those qualities that Luffy has. And then, of course, Usopp's courage in the face of some truly terrifying situations. I definitely kind of also really look to Usopp when I'm in a situation where, yeah, I am scared, but I want to like draw up some courage to face those fears. And I'm sure many of you have had similar experiences as well. Now, the girl's story is in the Straw Hat Stories novel as Nami's story. However, it was definitely reworked for Fan Letter for the better, I think, because in the original, the main character is a young man who is a hikikomori, which literally translates to like withdraw inward. But it's a phenomenon of people who live at home with their parents and withdraw almost entirely from society, just staying in their house or even their rooms, rarely ever leaving it. And so the man in the novel is a Nami fan, but he seems to be more of your typical like otaku nerd who drools over beautiful women. But seeing as how Nami is his idol, when he hears that Nami will be in Sabaody, he musters the courage to leave to see her. And by the end decides to kind of change his life and go back to school and resume his life. Now that isn't that bad, but let's just say it's a lot less pleasant of a main character. So I love that Ishitani decided to rework the story to focus on a young girl that is inspired to be adventurous and ambitious due to Nami instead. Like, I like that a lot better than the original story. Now, fun fact about this opening scene is that the girl's mom or grandmother, I can't really tell, who's telling her to go do her deliveries is actually voiced by Mayumi Tanaka, who of course is Luffy. And the girl is also wearing Nami's iconic original outfit that she debuted in, or at least in the manga. In the anime, she was wearing that weird thief's outfit, but we all know that that's not canon. So yeah, it's at least on the cover of Volume 1, you see her in that outfit. And you also see her wearing that during the Orange Town arc as well. Now, later on, the girl runs and she loses her letter and is bullied a bit by another Marine soldier, but is then helped by none other than Usopp. And I love this moment that Usopp is the one helping out this girl who looks like Nami because, how their relationship of Nami and Usopp, how often they rely on each other, being the two weakest members of the crew. He teaches him his trademark lying mixed with some of Nami's sort of weaponized flirting, which I thought was a really cool touch. I also find it hilarious that the girl is so caught up in her letter that she didn't even realize that she was talking to a Straw Hat member. But it's understandable and it makes perfect sense why she couldn't recognize Usopp, because at this point in the story, the world only knows Usopp as Sogeking from his bounty poster. Then we kind of move into what is an adaptation of Luffy's story with the two Marine brothers. And this is probably my favorite out of all of them because this is the closest to my relationship with One Piece as a fan. One where the characters and the stories have influenced and inspired you to so much that it changed the course of your life and prevented me from making decisions that I probably would have gravely regretted. And this story captures that feeling so well. Like, this story is left largely unchanged from the novel from what I can tell. Like I mentioned earlier, one thing Fanletter does an amazing job of is showing the absolute terror of being a normal soldier at Marineford, how the older brother was trapped under Oars Jr.'s sliced off leg. And when he did somehow survive that, he was met with an onslaught of lasers from Kizaru and the Pacifistas. And I don't think anyone would be blamed for running in fear in a situation like that. He was ready to abandon his younger brother, but upon seeing Luffy do anything to save his brother Ace, he was inspired to do what he felt was the right thing at the moment, was to go back and save his brother, which he is indebted to Luffy for making him realize this and preventing him from making a mistake that he was going to regret for the rest of his life. And I love that in the Fanletter version, they made the Marine brothers not blood related, just like Ace and Luffy, because in the novel version, they are blood related. And this makes the older brother's decision to go back even more significant and impactful because not only did he kind of dislike his younger brother, but they weren't even blood related. So there was even less obligation for him to go back. And so the fact that he does go back, that decision is much more impactful, I feel like. And probably one of the most relatable depictions of fans is the next one, the constant squabbling over power scaling with the people in the pub. And the hypothetical matchups and strength of the characters, which is what we see in Zoro's story. Now, in the novel, this is largely the same, except that in the novel, it takes place in a tavern in Dressrosa. And I love that their argument gets almost just as stupid and petty as us in real life, like how when the one guy brings up that Whitebeard is the strongest swordsman, but the other guy is quick to point out that he doesn't count since he uses a Naginata. And so I have seen this exact argument actually play out in forums and on Reddit, which is why I find this so funny. Similarly, you have the person who has no idea what the argument is and it just throws out someone completely random like Akainu, who's not even a swordsman. And this moment was absolutely perfect. It captures the power scaling and the debating that happens online between One Piece fans. And of course, then Sanji makes an appearance at the tavern asking why Blackleg isn't being mentioned, to which everyone mocks and laughs at him, to which he subsequently kicks them all in the head and leaves. But again, this is something that happens to a painful degree in the fandom, where you get Zoro stans versus Sanji stans arguing about who's better, who's stronger, who's cooler, like their life depends on it. And yeah, this is something that happens, and it just captures that aspect of the fandom really well too. Now, the next story is actually Frankie and Brooke's story mashed together in Fanletter with the bookshop owner and the two kids. Now, the bookstore owner is a Brooke superfan, but is depressed because she's unable to go see his final concert that's taking place at Sabaody. But she also serves as the character from Frankie's story in the novel that constantly sees Frankie appearing and being featured in magazine covers and getting articles and not understanding the hype around him. And while patrons come in and try to convince her why Frankie is so awesome in this case, it's the kids who take the place of, in the novel, it was Hoiko and Michael, who, if you don't remember, are the random street delinquent kids that Lulu and Tilestone originally thought were behind Iceberg's murder attempt. But that's because the novel has this taking place in Water 7 and had people like Kokoro, Mozu, Kiwi, among others, who live in Water 7, also coming into the bookstore to buy Frankie's magazine and talk him up to the bookstore owner in the novel. Also, instead of these familiar Water 7 characters coming in talking up Frankie, the fan letter version has characters like Chopper coming in and freaking out over Frankie in the manga or in the magazines, which is how she starts to see why Frankie is so famous. Fan letter goes a bit into one of the articles that is investigating why Frankie disappeared, and it starts with the Yagarabu rental shop owner in Water 7 being asked, does he know where Frankie is? And he says, I don't know, ask the shipwrights, which it then cuts to Polly running from a mob of people, which is a direct reference to the cover of chapter 488, where we saw him running away from a group of debt collectors as he tells the journalist, go ask Iceberg about that. Then when we get another really cool reference, as it cuts to Iceberg's new assistant telling the journalist, you need to make an appointment to speak with Iceberg. And this young girl is none other than Alice. And yes, that's how you pronounce her name. It's spelled like Alice, but it's pronounced Alice, which is, at least that's my way of pronouncing it. But apparently it's supposed to be the Italian pronunciation, which makes sense given Water 7 is modeled after Venice, Italy. Also, the katakana in Japanese, it's quite clear that it's written as Alice instead of Alice or Arisu. But this is technically the second anime appearance of Alice, with the first being a tiny Easter egg during the credits of film Red. But this is actually her first speaking appearance in fan letter, as she hasn't even really appeared in the main series yet. And even you wouldn't even know her existence unless you read the cover story, the Decks of the World cover story, and because she won't make her real appearance in the main story literally until just about a few months ago, during the Egghead Island arc. So yeah, this is actually your first exposure to Alice, which is, I thought, was a really cool thing. But also, in addition to Chopper as one of the patrons, we also see Robin in the bookstore, as you would expect, her being an intellectual and a scholar, expresses very little interest in tabloid magazines. So the other half of this, Brooke's part of the story, is a pretty far departure from the novel version, as the fan letter adaptation really just shares the concept of a person who really wanted to go to Soul King's last concert, but is unable to, and that's pretty much where the similarities end. In the novel, it's about a boy who is at the concert and trying to record the concert on a tone dial for his sick sister, but when he gets back to the hospital to play it back for her, it's just noises of rustling clothes. And saddened and disappointed by this fact, the brother apologizes that this was probably the last time Brooke will have a concert since he was outed as a Straw Hat Pirate, which we saw play out in the main story. So the sister asks him to play her new song, or play her the song New World for her on his guitar, which, she tears up and appreciates. And it ends with him promising to take her to a bunch of concerts when she recovers. And this was a really great story, but yeah, I see why this would have had to, would have been hard to fit into the narrative of fan letter. Now, the Frankie Brooke story was probably the weakest story featured in fan letter, with the whole bookshop keeper and all that stuff, but it still was a good representation of the fan experience, or dare I say, struggle of convincing people the awesomeness and greatness of One Piece. I'm pretty sure we've all, as One Piece fans, have struggled to convince the people in our lives to give One Piece a try and explain to them why it's so great, only to be brushed off. But when people come to realize that there is something in One Piece that they like or identify with, with one of the characters, usually they fall in love with the series too. And of course, some may never come around, and it's not for them, and that's honestly okay too. But I like how this story does sort of capture that, with the bookstore, worker basically being that type of fan of us trying to convince them that One Piece is great, whereas these people are trying to convince them that Frankie is really great. Lastly, Chopper's story is adapted following the Marine Vice Admiral, the benevolent King of the Waves, fawning over Chopper's cuteness. This scene has the benevolent king of the waves giving the Marine younger brother a key card for their new pirate killing weapon. The benevolent king of the waves character is pretty much the same as his novel version. However, he gets a bit more backstory, as he was at the Battle of Enies Lobby, and it was there, seeing Chopper, he discovered his love for Chopper's cuteness, and instead of being in charge of keeping the secret weapon key safe, he was actually on one of the ships that Hancock ends up blocking later on, and he's relieved that she stepped in and stopped him from attacking or having to be forced to attack Chopper. Whereas in this one, he's kind of just there on the super weapon, and then in the credits, you see him basically destroying that weapon later on. Again, this is another very relatable aspect of the fandom, that people love how cute Chopper was and has basically become sort of the de facto merchandising mascot for the series. And we even saw how this aspect of Chopper was even recognized by Oda himself, and pretty much after the Arabasta arc, Chopper's design would go through major changes to make him even cuter by making him the slimmer, cuter proportion version we know today. It's kind of funny how two of Ikue Otani's characters went through this exact evolution for marketing reasons. Just as Chopper went from being the fat, stubby character to the slim and cuddly one, so too did her most famous other role, Pikachu, from the Pokemon anime. It had basically the same thing happen. When you look at the early episodes of the Pokemon anime, or especially the original Ken Sugimori designs from Pokemon Green, Red, and Blue, the games, Pikachu was this fat chunker, and eventually he was slimmed down to make him much more cuter. And yeah, this represents the fans that we're all part of it, that we either find something really cute or really cool or really attractive. And yeah, we just love the series for its aesthetics, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And it's just really, yeah, it is a part of fandom. And, for everyone, this is part of a thing that they really enjoy, whether it's how cool Zoro looks, or how cute Chopper looks, or how hot Boa Hancock is, or how hot Nami is, or whatever, or how beautiful, these female characters, or how beautiful the male characters are, or how jacked they are. There are visual aspects that really get us excited about these characters as well, and that it contributes to our love and fandom of the series. Now, Usopp, Sanji, and Robin's stories from the novel didn't get adapted into fan letter, and I won't really get into their stories since I don't want this episode to go too long, and I'm here more to talk about fan letter. But they're all pretty interesting, but they're very specific to their characters, so I see why they were left out, as there's really no way to sort of adapt this unless they did a follow-up to fan letter where it kind of affords them more time to do more individual stories. But yeah, I can see why they left these three out. Before I kind of move on to sort of the overall themes, a couple funny Easter eggs that come up throughout this series or this episode. Towards the beginning, as the girl is trying to find another route away from the massive crowd, as she doubles back into the alleyway that she came, we can see a couple of world government agents running after they had just captured fake Robin and Chopper, so Coco and the Nora Kitsune. As you can see, the fake Chopper's tail sticking out of the bag from the events of episode 517. We also get to see Perona at several points throughout the episode with her hollow negative ghosts after she dropped off Zoro. Also, just after Chopper freaks out over Frankie in the magazine, we see the bookstore clerk get yelled at by who I presume is the store owner about leaving the back door key stuck in the door. And that is actually Akemi Okumura, the voice of Nami. She was probably given this cameo here since she's the only one who doesn't have a speaking line in the episode, since Nami herself never actually speaks in this episode. Later, we see the girl and the older Marine brother get chased by giant bugs from the Boeing archipelago that Heracles unleashes to help Usopp and friends escape as well. And then the final shot of the Straw Hats escaping on the Sunny, the fan letter version of this fixes a slight error from the original anime, where we see them celebrating the reunion and setting sail again, and in the original, Nami is just seen standing there, but the fan letter version gets this right and matches the manga, where we see her excitedly raising her arm and fist pumping into the air. And I like that they fixed this because it's a big focal point. It actually really zooms in on her as the girl is seeing Nami, raw for the first time. And so, yeah, I like that they went ahead and actually changed this to match the manga. It's interesting too because this is literally the first time we actually get to see that moment accurately, because even in the redone Fishman Island episodes, they completely skip this shot and just go straight into the Sunny diving into the water, which I think the reason why they did that was because it's not like they could reanimate it, but they didn't want to keep the incorrect shot maybe. Yeah, so the last part of this episode, I kind of wanted to just kind of talk about the overall themes. The themes of lives being changed by these characters. Like, they give us strength and courage to fight on through tough situations, even when we don't have magical devil fruit powers, and most of us aren't crazy strong physical fighters either. The idea that we can accomplish a great many things if we build a community, work together by contributing piece by piece, perfectly represented by the puzzle piece motif throughout the episode. And I love that even when we hit a setback and that puzzle gets broken, we can see, we could still rebuild as long as we don't give up and hang on to one piece and put it back together. And I love that the girl in the end doesn't get to meet Nami and give her the letter, but is still encouraged and inspired to live fully and as freely as possible, which also mirrors exactly our relationship with the Straw Hats. Like, of course, because these people / characters aren't real, we can never actually meet them and thank them ourselves. And hell, the vast majority of us will never even be able to meet Eiichiro Oda and thank him either, but they still mean a great deal to us, and despite them being fictional characters, they have had a real impact on each and every one of our lives in big and small ways. And the best we can do is write letters, like writing into the SBS, sending fan art through the Usopp Gallery at the end of each of the volumes, and things like the thousands of YouTube channels, blogs, and podcasts like this one that you're listening to, expressing our heartfelt appreciation and thanks to Oda Sensei and the Straw Hat crew for all the positive things that they've given us. The fun, the laughs, the excitement, the community, the hope, the strength, the perseverance, and inspiration through difficult and good times. And this episode just captures that so well. And the last shot after the credits is a nice touch, as it's a POV shot of us looking around at each Straw Hat member with the crew and Luffy smiling down at us, as if for a brief moment we actually got to be on the Thousand Sunny with all of them as fans, and we get a little bit of taste of what it's like to be with the Straw Hats. And I really love that because they purposely included that, because like they even had the little blinking eyes with the little blackout. And I thought that was a great touch. That was really cool. One Piece fan letter, in my opinion, was amazing and an incredible labor of love. It, in my opinion, perfectly captures what it means to be a fan of One Piece, because for many of us, this isn't just a piece of entertainment. It's so much more meaningful to so many of us and has impacted our lives in so many different positive ways. Like, fan letter manages to show all the different aspects of what it is to be a fan of this amazing epic series in just such a beautiful and fun way. And I hope they do something like this again at some point, later down the line, or maybe when the series ends, because it's so cool. And I really enjoyed it. And I think a lot of people did too, because it really does touch upon something that's truly special to us, and that only us who have watched or followed One Piece and read One Piece really can understand. Like, if you were to just show this episode to just anybody else, it probably wouldn't mean as much. It's still a good story, but all the meaning is just gone. And so I think this is something that's really well done, and shows the love, not just for the fans, but just the fact that I feel like the creators of this really love One Piece themselves, because I don't know how you could create this if you don't, because it just captures so many of the little intricacies of being a fan. So that's it for my take on One Piece fan letter. Obviously, I really loved it. Next episode, we will finally get back into the main story, and we will begin the big arc, the Dressrosa arc. So I'm excited to cover Dressrosa, because despite how poorly the anime adapts it, it is still an incredible arc in terms of the story, the characters, and sort of the development for the rest of the series. So I'm really excited to start Dressrosa. But yeah, it'll definitely be a slog for sure because of how slowly the anime is paced. But yeah, I'm still excited nonetheless. But if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast if you want updates of when I post new episodes and to see some pictures of my manga collection as well as my card collection. And yeah, again, like I always say, just listening to the podcast is enough for me. But if you feel like supporting me a little extra, feel free to check out my Buy Me a Coffee profile found on the website. But of course, not required whatsoever. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast and stay safe out there. And I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.